Welcome everybody. Folks are slowly rolling in here. So we'll take a few minutes doing our introductions for y'all. Tonight we're talking about no fuss native gardening in 5 steps. We are joined by Nikki Aker and Liz Vogel and Jane Hamill as well as our wonderful webinar guru, Angela Pauldine, in the background, always hidden as the introvert she is. So tonight's class, well, first, a few other things. Just to catch up on Chicago Bungalow Association news, we have our 25-year anniversary this year, so we're going to have certain events popping up, so keep checking our website for that. We also have an architectural restoration for homeowners class coming up on April 27th. So be sure and check that out. We've got a few more classes too that we're scheduling actively, so those will be on the website soon. Make sure you sign up. That way, if you sign up, you get an email at the end of this with all the information from the class. Tonight's class is going to be recorded, and we're going to send out an email, like I said, in a few days from now that will have any things that sort of come up tonight. We're also going to have the whole slideshow, thanks to our North Branch native folks tonight. So you'll get all that information as well, and a link to the recording too. So don't worry if you miss anything, it's no problem, you'll get it. Okay, so North Branch natives. Tonight's beginner-friendly class, they're going to walk you through 5 simple steps to planting, and maintaining a gorgeous native garden. Give you a bunch of practical tips to get you guys growing. And North Branch Natives is an education-focused gardening design company based on the north side of Chicago. It's founded by 2 friends and neighbors, Liz Vogel and Jane Hamill, to help new and experienced gardeners change the way they see and interact with their home landscapes. They joined by Nikki Aker in 2023. North Branch Natives is working to make the Chicagoland area a place for function and beauty, one garden at a time. Liz is a professional gardener with a master's in landscape architecture from University of Illinois. Jane is a business coach and supporter of small shop entrepreneurs across the country. Nikki is a master in the garden and holds her horticulture degree from Purdue University. Nikki and Liz are gleefully sharing no fuss native gardening in 5 steps with us tonight. So we're going to do about a 45-minute presentation now that Nikki's going to do for us. Then we're going to do Q&A at the end as usual. As many questions as we can take by 7 p.m. to get everybody out of here on time for the rest of the evening and dinner. I believe that's about it. Yeah, all right. Without further ado then, Nikki, if you want to take it, go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Please bear with me. All right. Think we're rolling. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Nikki, and I'm with North Branch Natives, and we're just so excited to be here. This has been a long time in the works, so I want to just, again, thank Carla and Angela for organizing all of this. It's been great, just the whole process. But yeah, we're here to talk about no fuss native gardening in 5 steps. So we'll just get into it. So like Carla mentioned, we are North Branch natives. And so, like I said too, my name is Nikki, and then I'm joined by Liz and Jane. And Liz and Jane started North Branch Natives with the goal to help people have success with native plants in their gardens. And since I've been able to come on board, we've been able to reach so many different homeowners and condo associations and library patrons and garden clubs. And it has just been so much fun to meet all these people and engage with them, and also to share what we love. We really stand by growing and working with native plants, and we love them and we love to share. So we are just, like I said, super, super happy and excited to share our presentation today. So here is the big question. Why do we garden with native plants? Really, there's very few reasons to not garden with native plants. One thing that I love about them is that there are so many different reasons to buy in on native plants. For one, it's really important to recognize that these species have been growing in our ecosystem, in our area for thousands of years. And in that time, they've developed so many intricate relationships, even down to like the tiniest little sweat bees even down to tiny ants to giant birds. And it's just really important to recognize that context. And learning to engage with these species and connect with them and bring them into our homes is a really beautiful way to share in that ecosystem and take part in it. But you can also just have a corner of your yard that always floods and you need plants to help soak up that excess rainwater. Or maybe you're sick of mowing your lawn. That's not even a lawn, it's just a patch of dirt. Native plants are also great for that. So they're not only beautiful and ecologically important, but they're also very practical. So there are just so many different reasons that we garden with native plants. We could spend the whole talk talking about that, but I want to share a couple of my favorite pictures, just again to illustrate that, we might be working with small spaces, especially in our urban context, but these small spaces can drive so much impact that you can even just see with your own eyes. This was a little corner garden plot in Evanston that was just brimming over the top with common milkweed. And at the time that I took this photo, I saw at least two butterflies flitting around. And again, this is just a tiny little corner on the sidewalk. I also get to see butterflies very frequently in our other native gardens. This swallowtail here was one that I captured a picture of in Forest Glen. And again, we love to welcome life into our gardens. And so sometimes we even come across some grasshoppers in that are in their business, but we love it. And so this brings us to North Branch Natives 5 steps to jumpstart your own habitat garden. And this has been really fun developing these 5 steps. Since we're talking with and educating homeowners all the time, we are always trying to think of the best ways to take all of this information and distill it down into very easy to manage, easy to handle chunks. And so when we were trying to think of this whole gardening process, we wanted to try to take that and break it down into 5 easy steps. And so that's what we did. The 5 steps are plan, prep, plant, steward, and share. So like I said, those are our 5 steps for today. We're going to go through each one. And by the end of this talk, you'll know how to start, how to take your garden from start to finish. So kicking things off with plan here. The first thing to do is to pick a new spot for your native plant garden. And again, you can have a lot of different reasons to pick a new spot for your garden. If you have a corner of your yard that always floods every time it rains, that could be a great spot. If you have a spot where the grass never seems to grow because it's too wet all the time or it's too dry and you put down so much seed, but it never seems to take. Could be a great spot for a native plant garden. If you have a parkway that's just absolutely scorched by the sun and surrounded by concrete on all sides, native plants can also do well there. Even if you just have a sight line that you want to improve, or if you just want to screen a little bit from your neighbors and get a little bit of privacy. Those are all things that you can do with your new native plant garden. And the other thing you'll want to do as you're planning is to choose your plants. And I think for a lot of people, this can be the hardest part because native plants are a very big and diverse group of plants. And if you're not familiar with them, it can be really challenging to just get started with that. It's like, how do I even know which ones to pick? So I'll elaborate on this more as we get through our talk here, but essentially, as you're picking your new spot, we find that it's easiest to just match your space to its natural analog. So for example, that super sun blasted concrete on all sides parkway could be a prairie. Maybe your parkway has some scattered trees, and maybe in the sun, in the morning it's pretty sunny, but then in the afternoon you get shade. So if you have part shade, you can draw your inspiration from savannas. Or maybe you just have full shade all the time, and that would be well suited to woodlands. So here is one of our clients' gardens in Edgebrook. And when they wanted their native plant garden, they knew that they wanted to have views out onto the space from their gorgeous patio. And so that's one thing that we wanted to make sure to incorporate. So there's lots of dynamic plantings around the edges of the yard. It really breaks up that fence line. It makes the space feel a little more intimate. And we also added some screening elements along because although these people wanted to be out and on their patio and engaging with neighbors, they did want a little bit of privacy. So we also included some taller plants in some spots, some trees and shrubs in others, just to give not only those dynamic views off of the patio, but also for a little bit of screening. Here we had a parkway that was just landscape fabric and bare dirt and is kind of boring. So this client, which was actually from a condo association over in Bucktown, they really wanted to have a more dynamic and engaging space. They wanted to bring more pollinators in. And so we said, no problem. And we added in a native plant garden to their parkway, which this is actually just 1 year of growth. It really took off since they had some great irrigation. This gardener here, this was up in Evanston. They actually had a beautiful mature oak tree in their yard for years, like the entire 20 years that they lived in this home. And the tree actually died. They had to have it removed. And so suddenly this like full shade backyard turned into a sun-scorched weed patch. None of the plants that used to grow in shade did well in this new super sunny environment. And so they just took a step back and were like, we have no idea what's going on anymore. So then we took this now sun scalded, weed riddled space and we added native plants. This client also really wanted birds, so we made sure to include lots of species that can feed birds through the winter. And again, just all this growth after just 1 year, which is super, super exciting. And we got another parkway. This is a really fun one because this particular gardener up in North Park realized that, wait a second, my entire parkway is just filled with dandelions, and that's it. Maybe it could be filled with other things besides dandelions. So this is where we work to add full sun prairie species to her little corner plot. And then we're actually now moving along in chunks and taking bit by bit of her parkway to convert it from dandelions to native plants. And this is our last shot here. This was from one other homeowner in Jefferson Park, and they moved into a new house that was just turf and sidewalk. And they knew that they wanted a pollinator haven, was her exact words, which was just so sweet. So we made sure to include lots and lots of different species blooming all through the entire year so that she can welcome these pollinators and this life into her backyard. All right. So choosing plants, which like I said, can be the hardest part. So here is how we like to break it down a little bit. For one, you can try following our 1-2-1 grass sedge model, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more. And also, I just want to remind everyone that your first plant list and your first garden, even, it does not have to be perfect. We are certainly not perfectionists, and we don't expect any of our gardeners to be. Just make sure that you're aiming for a diverse group of plant species that are suited for your space, ones that you can find and ones that you can get in the ground, because ultimately that's all that matters. And if you're not sure what plants will look good together, then definitely seek out inspiration from our natural landscapes around us. So here's that model. And this essentially came about because I could never narrow down a plant list ever. I couldn't do it. I was like, I simply can't. Every single planting gets 40 plants, and that's not a great way to do it. We've learned to scale back a little bit using this model. So the 1-2-1 grass sedge is basically making sure you have one thing blooming in spring, two things blooming in summer, and one thing blooming in fall. And although this can change, this can vary, it's just a good benchmark and also a good reminder that we want to have something blooming from the earliest of spring to the latest of fall, because that's going to offer the best resources for pollinators. One thing about pollinators is that there is such a wide diversity of bees, beetles, butterflies, maybe not grasshoppers, but just so much diversity there. And you never really know when one's going to be active, when one's not going to be active. And so we like to make sure that all of our plantings just have something in bloom the entire year. So instead of trying to figure out what each exact pollinator needs, we just try to make sure that they're all covered by having something in bloom from the earliest of spring to the end of fall. And then you must include grasses and sedges. This is one thing that I think a lot of our gardeners really get excited about flowers, and we do too, because they help pollinators and they do all these great things. But we also have to remember that all of these plants occur in a context that include a lot of grasses and sedges. They might not be as flashy. I think I would disagree. I think they're quite flashy. But they are still very valuable. They really do serve as the foundation for all of our plantings. They have extensive root systems that can really lock down the space. And they also offer support for your flowering species. Again, thinking of a natural prairie here, you can have up to 70 to 80% of that plant biomass as a grass or a sedge. So when we're translating that into our home gardens, we can't forget them. We've got to bring the grasses and sedges. So do not forget them. And like I said, we like to match the conditions of your space to what we're seeing out in nature. So super sunny parkways, it's a prairie. Something in between is a savanna. And then if you have dense shade, woodland. And like I said too, get out and find inspiration all around you. I think one of the greatest and like most fulfilling reasons to use native plants is that these are plants that occur in our area. And you can go out to your forest preserves, you can go out to different areas and you can find them and you can see them and interact with them and then take them back home to your home landscape. This is one of my favorite prairies. This is the Gensburg Markham Prairie. And again, like I just look at this and I see like a beautiful picture and I see something that I want to take home. I absolutely love the wide fan-shaped leaves of the compass plant. And I love how that contrasts with the really like fountain shape and thin foliage of the prairie dropseed. And then that scattered with the delicate blooms of the pinkish lavender bee balm and also the Virginia mint. It's just a stunning picture. And so I see this out when I'm scouting in a prairie or when I'm out in a prairie, and I want to take that home. And this also applies to savannas. So this is actually a very rare type of savanna and it's at Miller Woods in the Indiana Dunes National Park, known for its lupine population, actually. And this lupine is stunning. It blooms in June and is just carpeting this entire savanna. But again, it's great to go out in the landscape and go, oh my gosh, like this lupine is beautiful. It's stunning. I would love to have this in my garden. But then you can also see what grows along with it. I actually, when I was pulling this picture for the presentation, I didn't notice that there was some columbine also in it. And I went, oh my gosh, I want to have columbine and lupine in my next planting. And then the same applies for shade as well. This is actually over in Eugene Field Park, which is very close to home for us at North Branch. And this is a beautiful area where Short's aster just took over in the best way. And again, great to take that inspiration home. And you can even try mixing it with some of our favorites like bottlebrush grass and zigzag goldenrod. And now we're on to step two. So now we will tackle prep. And this is where you grab your gloves, you get your shovels, you're going out in the garden, and you're getting ready to go. And so your goal here is to clear out existing plants that you no longer want. So that could include weeds or that giant weedy patch that's just gone crazy. It also can include ground covers like English ivy, like vinca, maybe even Japanese pachysandra, some of those go-tos. You can also consider removing your turf or any other undesired plants. I think for me, daylilies might fall on that list. But once all that plant debris is removed, you can rake over the entire area so that your planting surface is smooth. Also, while you're prepping, you can calculate how many plants you need and gather your plants, which can also be another one of the hardest steps. We do at North Branch offer our own planting service, which is amazing. We bring all the plants you need right to your door, and then we help you get them in the ground. But also, the Chicago Bungalow Association has one of the best lists out there of where to buy native plants around Chicago. So many of our gardeners love that list. They use it like a tome, a Bible. They love it. So also make sure to check out that list when you're looking for plants. And here we go. I really wanted to include, we'll see if the video works. If not, we'll move along. But I wanted to include live footage of my favorite tool of all time, which is the scuffle hoe, also called Dutch hoe, has a lot of different names. But what I love, love, love about this tool is that it can get underneath the weeds that you're trying to remove and cut out those roots. And then it makes it super easy to loosen up that soil and rip away the plants that you're removing. And it results in a really beautiful, clean, finished bed. That is the tool that I used to clear out this area. It was riddled with creeping Charlie and some like gnarly grass that just like splayed out on the ground. And this was the best. I also love it because it has a long handle so you don't have to bend. It's a lot of core work, but it's not bending. So again, had to shout out my favorite tool. And then raking out the area smooth is always great. If you're removing turf, we get this question all the time because for so many people, the first step to adding a native garden is getting rid of the turf. And there's a lot of different ways to do it, and there's a lot of different factors that can be at play depending how big your space is, how much you feel like sweating, also the condition of the grass itself. And we do have resources to check out on our blog for that. We have a great guide for how to remove turf grass if you're interested in checking that out. But ultimately, I think for a lot of people, especially in the city where we might be working with smaller spaces, it's honestly just easiest to grab a shovel and dig it out. And so that's what we did here for this parkway over in North Park. And we just cut the bed edge with a sharp shovel and then just went in and dug it out and loosened up clumps and then shook off excess dirt. And then at the end, we just raked it up so it's nice and smooth, and then it's ready to plant. And we don't really like fancy tools. We use a lot of really basic ones. We, for one, really love the spearhead spade in particular. That's what's pictured in this lower corner. That's a great, just all-purpose, all-around shovel. I've had the same one for years. Doesn't leave my vehicle in the season. We also love soil knives just because they are, again, super utilitarian, super easy. It doesn't leave my hip. I love it. I'm also using pruners and hedge trimmers, but nothing too crazy. So some tips here too. It always helps to try a variety of tools while you're prepping your site because really different tools work better for different people and different bodies. So I think it's just really important to try different ones, see what works best for you and what works best for the garden task you're trying to accomplish. And then shifting gears a bit here, when you're ready to buy your plants and collect those, you got to stay flexible here, and be open to substitutions too. Because sometimes like the one plant that you're so set on, you're like, I want this plant. This is the one. It just might not be available. Sometimes these local plant sales might not have it, or maybe they'll have a different plant to try. So I think it's really important to, again, don't chase perfection here. Just stay flexible and try your best to get plants that are suited to your space and go from there. When you're collecting plants or when you're gathering plants to add to your new space, it is very handy to know how many to buy. And so this is the formula that we use when we're, getting estimates for plantings, and we actually base it off of the square footage of the bed. And so here is that formula, but then here's an example. So, like I said, we base this off of square feet. And our thinking here is that we plant with 12 to 15-inch spacing, which I'll explain why in a little bit. But we plant with that super tight spacing, and then we use that and combined with our square footage to see how many plants we need. So, for example, if you have a parkway that measures 12 inches or 12 feet wide by 24. Then you have 288 square feet total. And that means that if you're planting at 12-inch spacing, you need 288 plants. And then if you have 15-inch spacing, you need 184 plants. And really, like when we're planting a garden, we're not out there with a ruler measuring in between each plant. We're really not. But this calculation can just give you an estimate of how many plants you'll need and really just a ballpark. Because the reality is, if you maybe have some pathways going through your garden, or if you're setting your garden off of the edge of a sidewalk by a foot, you might not need as many plants as you think you did. Or on the other end, like maybe, I don't know. All of this to say, all this to say, really, this is just like, it's math. I think that's why it scrambles my brain so badly. It's math, but it's really just to get an estimate and to get a range so that you have an idea of how many plants to get. And now we're moving along. We're already on to plant. So when we go to plant, this is where it gets really fun because you get to place your plants throughout the space. And this is where we like to get very, very painterly and very creative. And we like to think about, oh, if I have this drift of grasses running throughout, then maybe I'll scatter in a couple bee balms or I'll scatter in a couple showy goldenrods. So like I said, this is where you can get really creative and have fun. And really, however you want your garden to look can change depending on how you place the plants in the space. If you want something, very, very prairie inspired, very random, you can just throw your plugs on the ground and then plant them exactly where they land. Or if you prefer maybe more formal looking garden with more distinct groupings, then you can just include more of those distinct groups. And maybe you just have, one clear group of 5 coneflowers here. And then your next distinct group is over here. So really, when it comes to placing your plants, how you do that can really determine what the look is and also what you're going for. Another good rule of thumb here is to keep your plants 1 foot away from sidewalks, curbs, pathways, just for very practical reasons. It helps to keep the plants from getting trampled on, maybe a little stepped on, maybe there's some road salt coming in their way. Just works out well to keep it 1 foot away from those edges. And like I hinted at earlier, you're going to try to plant 12 to 15 inches apart, which is actually very, very close together. But this is all for good reason. Our thinking here and what we've observed is that when we plant our spaces more densely, that encourages the plants to grow together that much faster, which is really what we want. When those plants grow together and form that unit, then they're so much better at being able to outcompete weeds, lock down the space, and do all of these good kind of low maintenance things that we might look to native plants for. Also, when you're planting, you want to make sure to water in your new garden immediately. This is like one of those things that as a horticulturist, you must water in your planting as soon as you are done planting it. That really helps the new plants going into your space to gel to the soil and really just helps things to get settled in and be able to establish well. And also consider adding a layer of chunky hardwood mulch. So here are some shots of us planting. Here's Liz. She is placing plants throughout the landscape. Again, keeping an eye to patterning here. She's definitely thinking about like, oh, what is this grouping going to look like here? Or what if I add these three plants together? Will they all be blooming at the same time? So as she's placing plants, it might look like she's just putting them down on the ground, which she is, but it's all with this intention of thinking about what plants we want interacting together and what look they might give. Here is another one of our bigger plantings. This was last summer in Park Ridge and was just so much fun. We absolutely scattered this whole area with plugs, which are those smaller plants. And it took a lot of digging and a lot of drilling to get these in the ground, but it was such a fun planting. More prairie inspired. And so although it did have a lot of mixing going on, we had a clear ribbon of like big blue stem wrapping around the tree. And then that gave way to a smaller grouping of plants in front, and super beautiful. And here's another like freshly completed planting as soon as we were done. And these plants might look small, and they do go in the ground small, but that is for a really good reason. When we use smaller plants, one, that is less digging, which is something I am always here for. And also these smaller plants are really, really adaptable. They experience less transplant shock than larger plants do when they go in the ground. And so although they go in the ground small, they catch up really, really fast. And just because I couldn't resist, here's another picture of a freshly planted garden. This was a really lovely, like sandy, shady garden, front yard garden in Lincoln Square. And it was just really great. We used a woodland and savanna inspired palette, and we made sure to have access walkways throughout. And it's just been so lovely. I was just meeting with this I was actually a condo owner the other day, and I was just meeting with her, and she was saying how there are little kids from the elementary school that when they go on their walks with the rings, they walk through their garden on that path. And it's just so sweet. I just really love stories like that. So when you're planting, remember these tips. A big one is try not to plant too shallow or too deep. You don't want to bury your plants and cover up the crown, which is where the top green part of the plant meets the roots. You don't want to bury that because that can actually lead to the planting to rot. And you also don't want to plant your plants too high because then they might heave out of the ground, or they might have a hard time knowing how to establish their roots. So when you're planting, it's really like a Goldilocks kind of level. You don't want it too high, you don't want it too low, you want to match those soil levels. Also make sure that your new plants are in the ground firmly. So usually I will like tuck them in all around the edges and then give them a gentle tug. I call that the squirrel test. And basically you just want to make sure that your plugs are in there tight enough so that your neighboring squirrel or chipmunk doesn't come along and just rip them all out. So make sure they're in fairly tight, give them the squirrel test. And then when you're done planting, you can actually just prop up a regular old hose nozzle with your soil knife, with a stick, whatever's around you, and create a sort of hands-free sprinkler, and you can water as you plant. It's something we do all the time. And here's a picture of what I mean. We're working along a long parkway. And then as we were planting, we had the hose going behind us so that we were working along the planting. And then as we were going, the garden was already getting watered. So that's great because the plants get their water right away, but you get to keep planting as you go. And again, nothing fancy here. We just use a hose, and that was the stick that I found that day. That worked really well. And then this picture too is a great example of the kind of mulch that we like to use. Again, nothing fancy here. We like to use even just the free hardwood mulch from the city. And it's just regular old wood chips. And like I said, you can get it for free. It's super simple and does a good job. All right, step 4. So now we're on to stewardship. And stewardship is essentially just how to care for your new garden. Really, our philosophy with native plants is that you pay for it up front. So, in the long run, you're not going to have to water your garden all the time. You're not going to have to weed it all the time. But you want to make sure that your new baby plants going into the ground have the best chance of success. So what that means is really buckle in on that first year. And you're going to want to water it about once a week for the first month, potentially more if we get some dry spells, using less frequent but deeper waterings, and also watch out for the weeds. A really, really big thing with that first year is, again, you just want to give your new plants in the ground the best opportunity to grow and establish so that they can then outcompete weeds and send out their own roots so you don't have to water it all the time. So the number one question I get, or the number one thing I tell people as soon as we put in a garden is they're like, okay, what do I do next? And it's the watering, it's the weeding. Just remember, it's the watering and the weeding. And like I said, your goal is to get all of your plants to grow together, form one cohesive unit, and then that will do all of those amazing lower maintenance things that we love native plants for. And over time, your focus will be less on the weeding and the watering, and it'll shift into more of editing and rebalancing. And so here's the picture that I like to bring up when people ask like to mulch or not to mulch. But it's also it illustrates a great point about stewardship. So this was one garden. This was the garden that we installed in Evanston, and we actually only chose to add mulch to the front half of the bed, where it was getting actually like washed over with silt from flooding. And then when we did that, it kind of created this like really great like mulch, no mulch kind of situation. And what I found when I was managing it was that the mulch was really great at keeping the weeds suppressed. That is one big pro of mulch. It also seemed to hold water to the top of the soil as well, which is a really great pro of mulch. And then if you compare that to the other side, where you can see there's some weeds coming back, you can definitely see that comparison of having mulch versus no mulch. But one thing that I did think was super interesting was in the areas that didn't have mulch, it was actually really easy for me to just take my scuffle hoe, take my Dutch hoe, and just go along around the plants and do the weeding that way. And it was super, super easy. But in the areas that had mulch, even though there were some weeds coming through the mulch, I couldn't really use my scuffle hoe there because it would mess up the mulch. So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure here if you feel like you want mulch or not. You can either choose to not have it and maybe opt for scuffle hoeing, a little less bending, or you can include the mulch, but just know that you'll have to do a little more hand spot weeding. And again, here are some of those first year plantings. If you really buckle in and make sure that it is watered and it is weeded through the whole year, then you'll get some amazing growth. Um, and this was, again, like a really great parkway, and it was super, super dry. But since they were super on top of the weeding, they were super on top of the watering, it was able to really grow and flourish. And you can get some incredible growth after just 1 year. And again, like we really want those plants to grow up, to grow together, and start to form that unit. And here's another picture where again, just after 1 year of just good stewardship and good maintenance, you can start to see the plants kind of growing together, which is exactly what we want. And then over time, the plants will grow together and they form something that looks like this. And then, instead of going in here, there's not much weeding to do. But then what you can start to do is to think, okay, well, it looks like the wild ginger is getting a little crowded out. So I'm going to pull back the zigzag goldenrod so that the ginger gets a little more breathing room. And it starts to be a little more hands off, a little more relaxed, and more like, oh, how will I rebalance the planting today? Rather than having to go out and weed all the time. You can also kind of start to do more like smaller scale things like removing encroaching turf grass from little edges. And again, this is just kind of how your garden will transition from very hands-on weeding and watering to more just rebalancing things, making sure that the edges are tidied up and smaller things like that. And so some tips to remember here too. Your plants will naturally shift over time as they find their ideal niches in the landscape. So again, you really don't have to worry about as much about how things are going in at first because they will shift over time. You also want to look out for bunnies and deer, and also make sure to leave your stems, your leaves, other plant debris in the garden. If it grows in the garden, it goes in the garden. And then all of those things will contribute over time to act as a free mulch and contribute more organic matter. So when I say look out for bunnies, especially if you're in Evanston or Skokie, I really mean look out for the bunnies. And everyone will ask me like, how do you know that there were bunnies here? And I'm like, because if you look here and look closely, you'll notice that both of these stems have been nibbled at a 45-degree angle to the stem. And that is telltale sign that bunnies have been here. So a lot of times I'll show up to these new gardens, people are like, I don't know what happened to the plants. And then I take one look, I'm like, it was bunnies. So the bunnies are here. And you have to remember that the bunnies are hungry too. And when you put out these beautiful native plantings, it's essentially a salad bar for the bunnies, and they're very grateful for it. And new plants, or let me rephrase that. So established native plants, they can handle some bunnies nibbling on them from time to time. But really, when it's like your new plants just trying to get established and get a foothold, you do just want to make sure they're fairly protected from bunnies. If they're in your area, just keep an eye out. And if they get to a point where they're super severe and your young baby plants just can't get established, then you can consider putting up some fencing. That's what we ended up doing for our Evanston garden. And that's where the picture on my right is, where you can see exactly where the bunnies nibbled it. But then once we added the fencing, it was all able to flush back and grow back as normal, and the plants are doing great now. Also, you want to keep your stems up through the winter. We are just now starting to kind of think about stem cutbacks, but it's important to remember that your stems act as resources and habitat. Through the winter, seeds left by your coneflowers, by your black-eyed Susans, can be great food for overwintering birds. And also, your stems are habitat. So this is actually a stem that I found last spring. And you can see the circular entrance hole where I'm assuming some kind of stem nesting bee went in. And then you can see it created its nest, which is just so magical and so fun. But also a really important reminder that all of these things that we're adding to our gardens, it is habitat. So it's great to leave it in the garden and let it be. And if you're wondering, when do I plant? When do I do this? When do I do that in my garden? Then we have a really awesome guide that I totally encourage you to check out. You can grab it at this link here and download it, and it just really helps to explain this is when you cut back your stems. Here's a good time to plant, and can help you just like get a better sense of gardening through the seasons. And this brings us to our last step, which I think might be my favorite. It's share, which is very sweet, but I mean it with just like in so much earnestness. Just because I think it is so much in the spirit of native plants to share them. Share extra seeds if you have them. Share extra runners of your plant that you took out while you were editing. Engage with your community, talk to your neighbors, talk to your children's school, and say like, hey, these native plants are really awesome, and we would love to see them in more places. I think it's just been so much fun these past few years to not only like work with native plants every day, but also to engage with these different communities and these different people and just really share everything we've got. So the fifth step of your new native garden is to share. And here are our big takeaways for the evening. One, remember, your first round of planting, it's your foundation. It really is just meant to kickstart the space, lock down the ground, and set the stage. It does not have to be perfect. And I think that is really the biggest takeaway here. You can always add to it over time. You can remove plants over time. You can always edit over time, but really just get the foundation down and you can always go back and fix it and tinker, as gardeners love to do. Gardening is also all about experimentation. So some things may work amazing and others might not. And I think that that's something that we always are humbled by as gardeners too, is we're always learning and sometimes things just don't work. And that's okay because it's all part of this process. Also, you can move away from thinking of your garden as a static thing. It is going to change year to year. These plants will move and maybe they'll pop up in new unexpected places and things will change, but that all really is part of the beauty of it. And I just think it's so special to be able to have a sense of surprise in your landscape. And the last big takeaway is that North Branch Natives is here to help. And I do really mean that. We really do just like, we want to help people have success with native plants in their gardens. And we really have our services set up so we can help at whatever level you're at, whatever step you're at. Any of these 5 steps here, we're more than happy to jump in. Okay, so let's grow. We're actually going to roll into our Q&A session now. But right before we do that, I just wanted to, again, let you all know that we are here to help every step of the way. Here are all of the ways we can help. If you're interested in getting these slides, we'll share them with you so that you can click through to all these different links and see what we have to offer. And here's some more resources. These are all of the things that our gardeners love to use. So please check these out, see what might work for your space. And there we go. Ready for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikki. That was great. So many good resources too, like just tons, lists and lists. I know. Thank you. I also appreciated that you opened up with that racy grasshopper pick.
I simply couldn't resist.
I don't blame you. It was cracking me up over here. As we're leaving Jane, who were like, nobody could see this but me, who were like pointing and laughing, like essentially cheering you on and admiring beautiful work. So also, Liz and Jane were busy answering some of your questions along the way. And I think that they're going to sort of go through whatever is remaining now and respond to you. I'm sure Nikki might want to pop in as well. So yeah, we have just a few more. I just want to remind everybody, this is recorded. Everybody will get a recording. Again, North Branch Natives was kind enough too to say that they'll send the slideshow along as well. So you can, pause on things as much as you like and click on hyperlinks and all that good stuff. So don't worry if you missed anything. But yeah, let's get to the rest of the Q&A. We've got about 11 minutes. So yeah.
All right. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Do you want to turn off the screen, Nikki?
Oh,
Or
yes.
should we leave it
we can
on?
do
I
that.
don't know.
Okay.
Great. So hi, everybody. I'm Jane from North Branch. Liz. Some awesome questions. Why don't we go ahead and lead with Liz? You got the list here.
Yeah.
So let's
So one question, and I think we get this a lot, and we have a blog post that talks a lot about prepping your site and what's the best method. So I had one question about, can you just put cardboard down?
Is this for turf removal?
It wasn't specifically mentioned turf removal, I'm kind of assuming, or it was with whatever weeds you have going on there, whatever's in that spot. Like, what's the best method, or does it depend on the size of the space or the time you have?
Yeah. Cardboard is a great method. I think it's great because it's less labor intensive. It's a lot easier to lay down layers of cardboard than it is to pick up a shovel and start digging out turf. So for that reason, I really, really like it. I like how it's hands off. I also like that it's something that it does take a little bit of time, but like I said, it's fairly hands off. Once you have it set in place, then it should get going to work. I think big things to keep in mind with the cardboard method is that you do want a thick layer. So you have to make sure that you have a lot of cardboard. So for that reason, it might work better for smaller spaces, just because it's less boxes you have to accumulate. But make sure you have a thick layer of cardboard. Make sure you have like a lasagna of like cardboard, wood chips, cardboard, or any other iteration of that. And also make sure that you keep it fairly moist because that moisture will really help to break down the plants underneath.
Next question. We're getting quite a few really good ones about what do I plant here if I have lots of dogs, if I have salt, if I have an area planted the round corner of the house, if I have all these stop signs. And like, we actually just did a post on this, like like what plants can go in difficult areas for Chicago, dealing with Chicago. So I'll pop the link in there. I think there's too many to answer specific, I think, at the moment. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll put that in there because it's literally like if you have a rain area, if you have dogs, if you have salt, you know, we kind of say, here's some plants to go. Here's some species that would be great for you.
Yeah. And Nikki, do you want to add anything? We've talked about this a lot lately, just about even the dogs or the foot traffic or how to kind of do some strategic things to make your garden.
Yeah. I think the go-to things in our toolbox are one, having some tough plants. There are certainly some very resilient native plants that we like to include for those more tough areas. Also for things like foot traffic, we like to include lots of pathways, especially through parkways where people are gonna want to walk through them anyways. So if people are going to walk through, you might as well give them a pathway just to guide them that direction instead of directly through your garden. Um, I also have been talking a lot about pea rocks lately, specifically related to dogs.
Well,
And I've heard they work great. So that could be another tool in your toolbox.
Love it. That's
that's
funny.
good. Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
you got it. Oh, I was just gonna say seeding into a landscape, and we've done some of this. What's a good, so we had one question was that somebody has tried to do seeding and it wasn't really taking, so they had a lot of bare spots. And what would be maybe a good strategy if somebody wants to try it out?
That is a good question. I think that with seeds, I've definitely learned that there is an element of patience. I think that I'm so used to working with plants that are already like, first year plants or even older. And so I'm used to that instant effect. But with seeds, it can take a little more time. Or, the first year your plants might only be like an inch or two tall. But I guess like some practical steps would be to just make sure that you're seeding fairly heavily. I think that, more seeds means that you have more chance of germination success, which means more plants, which is a very good thing. There are also other techniques that you can try, like mowing. That can be especially helpful with seeding, setting your mower deck really high and just trying to get annual weeds out of that equation. Um, yeah.
I haven't, we talked about, we have a whole strategy based on this, but those quick start those quick start plants. So there are so plants need certain amounts of time. Some plants are slower than others. Some seeds are slower to germinate, but there are some plants, some seeds that can germinate really quickly and kind of fill in, and kind of hold that space. And so they're just, I think, a little easier to get going right away. So I think if you seed it and then nothing really happens, you have a tendency for other things to pop in and things to wash out and that kind of stuff. So I think a good strategy, and sometimes it's almost like thinking of it like a cover crop, but some of these really quick to establish native plants. So
Like which ones?
like Bootalua, like some of the grasses, which are really quick to go. Some sedges are really quick to go, and can really fill in. Some plants that have, that don't need a winter dormancy or not a moist, cold dormancy, can germinate right away. And so I think it's like if you pick the Rudbeckia is great. Rudbeckia hirta is a good one. And so some of those, I think if you're really strategic about the thing and about which plants, and then like Nikki mentioned, put a lot of seeds in the ground and tamp them down, make sure they're stuck in there, and put a little bit of chunky mulch over the top to lessen washout. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And this I think is a really great question about why planting with small plants. Why do we plant with small plants? Like what's the advantage or yeah.
That is a really great question. I love planting with small plants. I think that yes, they go in the ground small, but like I mentioned, they're so much more adaptable. I think
What,
that
that's what I'd like to back up, like small plants as in like first year plugs. Like what does that mean maybe for some of our newer gardeners?
okay, yeah. So a first year plug is essentially a plant that is in its very first year of life. Sometimes when you buy larger plants like gallons, they have actually been overwintered and they can be like a 2 to 3 year old plant. But those first year plugs are like I said, they're in their first year of life, and the plug is that it's the name of that very small plant that typically comes in trays. And those small plants are great because, like I said, they're super adaptable. They're also very cost effective. It's so much less expensive to buy one flat of, 38 plugs versus a handful of gallon plants. So we really like them for those reasons. We think they're super adaptable, they're more affordable, and they do catch up so fast.
Yeah, so this one particular person had mentioned planting, it was probably a #1 container and the plant died.
That means a gallon container?
Yeah,
Okay.
basically a gallon container. Yeah.
Newbie gardeners.
And so like you mentioned, Nikki, just these smaller plants just really they're just really much, I think, much easier to establish, and they fill in really quickly. So it's hard to say what that was, but I think using small plants costs less money. You're toting around less soil. They, fill in and take off in your landscape, pretty easily. You don't have to dig a bunch of giant holes. And so we'd love that.
It's interesting because she said, I had the big one, I put it in and it died immediately. Is that because of transplant shock? I think Liz, you're like, well, I'm not sure what it's from, but I'll tell you, it's depressing when that happens, right? But when I plant, since I'm the newer gardener, if I plant the small ones, which, didn't cost as much, I didn't have to dig as hard, and I put them in and something, they don't work, which is going to happen. It's like, oh, well, that one worked and that one didn't. It's like just
It's very
also
it's much more cost-effective.
emotionally easier, I think.
Definitely. Let's see, we have probably time for maybe one more. Okay, so I think we get this a lot, Nikki, are the dry, shady spots. Like
Yeah.
clay
Oh yeah.
soil,
Like
parkway, shady, dry. What are your thoughts on what to do there?
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the closer that you get to the lake, the more sand that there is, and then the more dry gardens there are. And I think dry shade is one area in particular that, especially with maybe more traditional garden plants, people are like, I don't even know plants that'll do well there. But there's so many native plants that not only do well in dry shade, but thrive in dry shade. They are adapted for those areas. They are used to growing in like the tiniest crack in some caked soil that is drying out. Like these plants are adapted for those kind of locations. So you can have a really beautiful, lush looking garden, even if you have the driest shade. Like last summer, we even planted like directly under maple trees, which is super shady, super dry. And as long as you really help to water and get those plants established, they'll do fine. They do great.
And what's that? So I guess the watering period. So establish, I think we usually say, for the first month every week and then kind of as needed, keep an eye on it. Sometimes we hit a drought and you have to do a little bit more. Yeah. So
That is one thing I would point out for new gardeners. Nikki was really saying you water a lot when they're new babies, but after that, not. And so I don't know if everybody knows that distinction for natives. So,
Mm.
and then we had a great question about Marilyn said, so it seems like at the beginning you may have been suggesting exploring the forest preserves and taking cuttings of plants from there. Was that what you were suggesting?
Oh, no, not taking cuttings, not taking seeds.
So
No,
glad you asked
no.
that.
yeah, thank you.
No,
Thank
we
you,
take
Marilyn.
pictures, we take inspiration. But no, like again, as much as I love to encourage sharing among gardeners, when I talk about that, I definitely mean from your home gardens or from your community gardens. But please be mindful that if you are going to forest preserves or to prairies, like those places are natural places and they should be left that way. So unless you have special permission, you cannot collect seeds, you cannot collect cuttings, but you can take inspiration and photos.
Awesome.
I know.
Somebody asked, so,
I'm sorry.
somebody asked, so will you come to my house?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. I know we're over time, but like you have to answer that one.
Yeah. Yeah, we will come to a house, but that's a different day. Yeah. But yes, if you're looking for services, we do provide services like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that you guys were kind enough to offer to, like, you put your email address up there. We can also put that in the email that goes out after this, the next few days. So if people have, I know it's hard to get to everybody's questions because they tend to all kind of rush in at the end. But
I'll tell you, Nikki, and the horticulturist on the team, when someone emails us a plant question, it does not go unanswered. So
Yeah,
please feel free to
Yeah,
email Let's Grow at North Branch Natives, because these two will stay up all night answering your plant questions. Okay? They will.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we're at a couple minutes over, so we can go ahead and wrap up. But thank you all so much, Nikki, Liz, and Jane. So helpful, so fun, beautiful, beautiful spaces. And I know those parkways are a big thing for our members as well. Always trying to figure out what to do with those and the shade issues and the dog issues and all of it. I know you mentioned that you're going to, you have some additional resources, including that blog that we'll also put in the email, so they'll have that as well. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, have a lovely rest of your evening.